Welcome to Monetize the Mic.
I'm Jessica Rhodes.
And I'm Margie Feltune.
And we are the co-owners of the award-winning multi-seven-figure podcast booking agency, Interview Connections.
This is the show to teach you how to transform your business and life with the power of visibility and strategy.
Let's get started.
In today's episode, we are talking about creating an agile company using Scrum. And if you've been following us anywhere over the past 5 months, you've probably noticed that, at least for me personally, I have become totally obsessed with agility and Scrum. And this is something that started, I read a book 5 or 6 months ago called Scrum: The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. I actually almost didn't read the book based on the title. It sounded gimmicky and stupid and like another productivity book. And I was like, I don't care. And my friend Lisa Larder, who has Thought Readers, we've featured her on this show before. She has an amazing business book club. It was the Thought Readers book for that month. And I read a lot on my own. Sometimes I won't read the Thought Readers book if it's something I've already read, or if it's not what I'm focusing on right now. So she was like, you should really read Scrum. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And she was like, it was also, not only did I think it was a productivity book, but it seemed to be geared towards software businesses. And we're obviously an agency and coaching company. So I was like, that's not us. But she was like, she does not have a software business. And she said, I'm learning a lot of really great stuff about how to manage my team better and structure my team better. And that got my attention because obviously we have 25 full-time team members. And a big part of what we focus on now at this size in business is people. Every problem is a people problem. Every solution is a people solution. So she said that, and I was like, okay. So I started listening to this book, and it was on audiobook. I was walking around my neighborhood. I must have been the equivalent of like 1 page in. And I started laughing hysterically. So I probably looked insane because I'm like walking down the street in my neighborhood, just like laughing with headphones in, because it was just so funny to me to hear all these things that we had been struggling with, and to hear how simple the solutions to them were and how much we had been creating our own problems by not being a more agile company. So I was very early on in the book when I was like, this is it. Like, we need to go all in on this. And I don't always do this. I read a lot of books. I read like multiple books per month, and I don't want to give people whiplash. So I try not to over implement. I'm not like every book. I'm not like, okay, now we're going all in on this, because that would be a lot. But this book, I was like, I think we should go all in, like not just like read it and incorporate it, but like go all in on implementing Scrum. So the rest of the leadership team read it. We hired an amazing consultant named Brandy who could help us because it's very much talked about. It's very popular in IT, in software product businesses. A lot of people who come out of that space, if you're out of that space, you're probably like, yeah, I know what Scrum is, duh. But for agencies and coaching companies like us, it's really not widely used. And so I hired a consultant because I needed a human being who could help me adapt what I had learned from this book to our company, which is so different than the typical Scrum company. So we have been doing that for the last 6 months. And I wrote this blog post with some of our initial learnings and takeaways that we've gotten out of this process so far.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that Margie is like not an over implementer. In fact, she's often telling me, don't read this, but don't just implement right away. So
I'm usually trying to rein everybody in a little bit.
Margie usually pumps the brakes on implementation, but so when she was so gung-ho about this, we definitely all took note, took it seriously, and it was wild because like these problems and these challenges that we've had forever is like, there's just been no answer. And I think the lesson here is there's a lot of lessons we're about to tell you, but I think the overall lesson with just like looking at this book, there's so much value you can get from going outside of your industry. not just like with different types of, people with different target audiences and things like that, but we're an agency, we do business coaching, like we're around online entrepreneurs, but literally going across the universe over to the software as a service industry and seeing what they're doing. So yeah. And I
Yeah.
just want to say also, Lisa was DMing me on Instagram telling me to read it. And that's how I knew it was like, okay, because you're in Lisa's group. So you guys are like
Mhm.
really good friends. Lisa and I, we don't talk as much. So when she was like, you guys should read this, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Lisa had a vision and she was totally right. Um, and I think I've become, out of everyone in Thought Readers who's read it, I think I have gone the most extreme in terms of implementation of it.
Yeah.
I really like your point about other industries. And that's why we always make sure we mastermind and coach with people from other industries in our own coaching program. We make sure we have people from various industries because there's so much stuff that you don't even think about that's just common knowledge in your own industry. And for people in other industries, they're like, wait, what? And I heard this quote, and this is not an exact quote, but I thought it was so interesting. Somebody was saying that innovation isn't just making something up out of thin air, it's taking something from one place and applying it in another place. And it's just wild. It's so simple, right? But it's so effective. So basically what we did after reading this book and hiring Brandy, we broke apart. This has been a massive undertaking and we're still in it. This was not like hey, like here's some quick tips from this book to keep in mind. It was like we changed the entire structure of our organization, which is like, there's a whole other episode about change management and doing stuff like that. But we broke apart all our departments. We totally restructured everything so that we had cross-functional teams with people from different departments all working together on a Scrum team so that they're able to serve clients start to finish. And we also changed the hierarchy. So instead of having like a manager overseeing them, we're moving towards self-managing autonomous teams who have coaches who are not managers. So they're not in charge of hiring and firing. They're truly coaches who are servant leaders, in charge of removing obstacles. So it has been an incredible journey. If you have questions, reach out to us because there's a lot more we could share that we're not going to share here. But I just want to share, I wrote out the top 8 takeaways that we have learned in just a few months of implementing Scrum. So, number 1, this first thing is the fastest result we saw. So, the first pilot team started their first 2-week sprint. And then after they sprinted a few times, the other 2 teams started sprinting alongside them. So now we have 3 teams who are sprinting in 2-week sprints, and they're all coordinated with each other. This was maybe a week into the first sprint of the first pilot team. So this is like way too early to see any result in my mind. I had zero expectations. I was like, just don't like burn the place down. Other than that, consider it a success because it's so early on. But we saw this result immediately. And that is that it was easier for individuals to take time off without stress. And this was wild. So we had somebody who was a key member of the first pilot Scrum team who had a vacation planned, and it had been planned since before this. So it was happening, right? It was just happening during the first pilot sprint because that's how life is, right? Stuff happens and you just have to make it work. People take time off, unexpected stuff happens. And when we sat down as a company for the first sprint review, the pilot team was sharing how that first 2-week sprint had gone. And this person shared that she had been able to take a vacation, and it was the first time she'd been able to take time off where it hadn't been stressful when she came back because they're working as teams instead of individuals with individual workloads. If one person is off for a day or even a week or 2 weeks, it's no longer the scramble to cover their clients and cover their work. And then they get back to all these emails and all of this backlog and all of this stuff that's not done. There's suddenly the teams are all doing the work together. They're all sharing the work. So when somebody leaves and comes back, there's no disruption, there's no stress. And this is something that in the following months, we've had other people from other teams report as well, which is so exciting to us because we're focused on, yes, productivity and client happiness, but also team happiness, right? We want to eliminate burnout. We want a happy, fulfilled team. And having people be able to take time off and not be stressed about it is such a huge thing in terms of getting rid of burnout, because you can say, oh, take a vacation, you'll be less burnt out. But if taking a vacation is more stressful than not taking a vacation, it's not going to help. So this was such an incredible breakthrough.
Yeah, because we would like kind of hit our heads against the wall, trying to like okay, we'll add more PTO, we'll increase our vacation time. And they're like, yeah, I'm still stressed even using the PTO because I have all this work before I go and then I come back. I'm stressed about giving work to my team. So seeing this result right away was like, ah.
Yes. Amazing. All right. Number 2. And this is a quote from one of our amazing team members named Jude. And he said, eliminating interdepartmental games of telephone so that we're not wasting time. So this is huge. We previously had multiple departments in the company who were all on the service delivery side. And I don't think we even realized, especially as a remote company, but even when we were working together in an office, how much time is wasted on bad communication, because departments are so, they're so siloed from each other. So they need to communicate about clients. They're working with the same clients, but there's so much wasted energy trying to get that communication from one department to another department to another department. And it really does become like a game of telephone where the information at the end is not actually what it started as. And then it causes confusion, and then it has to go back down the line and people are getting frustrated. So I want to say here, it's not like our business was a train wreck before Agile, right? Like we were delivering a great service. We have a great team, but these were things that our Scrum coach always says, Scrum and Agile don't solve your problems. They make your problems visible. And so this was not something that I would have said was a huge pain point 7 months ago. If you had asked me what like the top problems to solve in the business, this would not have even been listed because that's how much it was in a blind spot. But once we implemented this, we were able to see how much better it was, and then see how much time and energy we had been wasting when our teams had been structured in a different way. Number 3, removing individual performance metrics lowers stress and allows team members to focus on what's actually important. We have been through a journey when it comes to metrics and KPIs for our team members. So Jess and I first started hiring in-house team members and training them in 2017. And we've done episodes about it. It was a shit show. Like, it's not easy to do, especially if you don't have a ton of experience in it. You don't know what you're looking for. You don't know how to hire. Like, we didn't really know how to train, how like hands-on we should really be. And for a long time, we had no metrics, right? Like, it was just like, well, they're here, they're on their computer typing away. They're working.
It must be working.
Right. And we really weren't, as a company, effectively tracking what are these key metrics that we need to be looking at, and how are individuals responsible for their part in those. And so step 1 was chaos, like really not a lot of clear metrics for people. They didn't have a lot of clarity on what success looked like. And this was particularly challenging because Jess founded this industry, podcast guesting. It's a very new type of industry. We are the first podcast booking agency. As far as I know, we're the only one who uses full-time in-house team members. So it's not like a sales role or another type of role where it's really easy to see what is the industry standard and then create metrics and KPIs around that. We have a whole different animal. It's kind of the wild, wild west. So we then moved to having individual KPIs. So we set metrics for our agents and our show researchers around how many bookings that they were getting, how many referrals that they were getting, how many pitches they were getting out. And this was definitely an improvement on the chaos because it allowed us to objectively talk to team members about their performance. It allowed us to see which team members were doing well and which team members weren't doing well, and to make decisions and have conversations accordingly. So this was an improvement. But with Scrum, we found that we actually needed to leave these individual metrics behind. And that was a little bit scary because as a leader and an owner, there's always that thought, I think, of like, if we get rid of individual metrics and performance KPIs, how do we hold people accountable? Like, are people just not going to work? But it's such a huge part of Scrum and Agile that it's not individuals, they're working as a team. And there's so much research behind, you can improve the performance of a team so much more than you can improve the performance of one individual, no matter how great they are. So it's worth your time and money every time to focus on the team performance, not individual, and improving that. But even knowing that, it was kind of scary, but we did it. We got rid of all the individual performance metrics so that they had team metrics. They have goals as a team, but they no longer have pressure about who does what. So for example, when everyone had individual booking metrics, they had to generate a certain number of bookings per week on podcasts for their clients. It meant that they really needed to focus on what they needed. So if they only had 4 bookings for the week, even if the team needed, another task done, they had to be like, sorry, I got to get these bookings because I'm not going to hit my metric. Once we got rid of these metrics, now team members are free to do what the team needs. So one person might send out 0 pitches in a week if they're working on something else that's really helpful for the team. And because they don't have these individual metrics they have to worry about hitting, they're free to do what the team actually needs instead of what they feel like they have to do. And that allows the team to actually move faster and be more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, we've had this question. We were talking about Scrum at a recent mastermind meeting that we were attending, and people were like asking that question, like, how do you know, like, what do you do about holding people accountable? And it's kind of magical how when you have the right people and you have the right culture, and there's this culture of like accountability and full self-expression and everyone's being honest with each other, it does sort of work out. So
yeah, I think accountability has been something that in this initial stage has been less of an issue than we thought it would be, which is one of the things I love about Scrum and Agile. It's all about testing, right? You want to get away from creating these big, like hypothetical plans that of course never work when you actually do them, and get into, okay, how can we run a little test? How can we test this and see how it works? And that has been such a great way of being. And it's shown results like this, where we were so sure that something would be a really big issue, but when we actually tested it, it really hasn't been. Will it ever be an issue? Probably yes. We will be figuring that out and we will be reporting back what we learn. But in this initial stage, it has not been an issue yet, which has been a really interesting learn because it was something that we were very focused on as a potential obstacle. All right. Adjusting how teams approach work frees you from the expensive and ineffective trap of solving problems with addition. This is number 4. This is something we've talked about before. We talked about the book Multipliers, which we love and recommend and had our whole leadership team read. But we realized that we were very focused on simple math to solve our problems in business. Like, if we had more clients, we added more team members. If if they felt overwhelmed and they weren't able to get the work done, we added more team members. We bought more resources. We bought more coaching. We bought more leads. And this year, we've really focused on how do we multiply what we have already invested in and really understand if it's even effective before we just pile more resources on top and bloat our expenses and bloat our payroll. So Scrum and Agile works really, really well for this because by changing the way we structure departments so that we're not losing so much time on those games of telephone and those bad communication, by eliminating individual KPIs so that teams can have everyone in the team do what's needed in that moment rather than what they feel like they have to do. And looking at, what is the work that's actually having an impact? And is there work that really isn't having an impact? Is there stuff team members are doing that really probably doesn't need to be done? And we found a lot more of that than you'd think. So through all these different ways, and then also these time boxes of these 2-week sprints where they work for 2 weeks and then they have an opportunity to have a retrospective, review what happened, decide what they're going to change, test and tweak, and then do another 2-week sprint. All of these things combine and make it so that the same number of people in the same number of hours are able to accomplish more and more and more. And this defies math. This defies addition, right? This is all multiplication. And it's the type of thing that until you experience sounds kind of like a scam. It sounds a little bit too good to be true. Like, how can the same number of people in the same amount of time do more work? And that is kind of the paradox of Scrum. And we have seen it start to work because once you work in this way, once you're able to problem solve and bring obstacles to the surface, you realize how much of that time and bandwidth and mental energy has been wasted.
Yeah, absolutely. As of this recording, we have implemented Scrum and Agile on the service delivery side of our business, and we're just about to implement it on our sales and marketing side. And it's so like wild and crazy to like see how it's working, and now like have the visibility to understand where we're working in silos and what Agile and Scrum will help us solve, because it's so true. Like we've been in that trap of like more sales reps, more sales reps, more leads, buy more leads. And now understanding how Agile and Scrum and multiplying works, it's like, it's creating a whole new possibility for growing without like bloating your expenses and just like adding more people.
Yeah. And I think that's a question most business owners are trying to solve, right? How do I get more out of the same amount of resources? And I thought that was a question that didn't really have a satisfying answer, right? I was like, well, you either overload your team with work and burn them out, or you keep hiring and keep hiring and keep hiring. And I kind of thought those were the only two options. And if you are in that boat, very exciting news. Those are not the only two options, which is such an incredible realization to have. Number 5, working in sprints creates rapid improvement and makes big changes less risky. So this is something I've been mentioning throughout this episode, talking about these sprints. So one of the foundational pieces of Scrum is that teams work in sprints. So for us, we decided to make those sprints 2 weeks. And this has been crazy. Like, you wouldn't think that this would make such a big difference to think about time and to box time like this. But it really does, because in the past, when we would try new things, it would be like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And we would implement, right? Like we were good implementers, but there was no structure to evaluating how do we know if this has been successful? Like it felt like we would just throw it in and it would get lost in the shuffle, like never to be seen again. And we'd be like, hopefully that works better. But what sprinting has allowed us to do is have this structure where, first of all, teams are making their own decisions on what changes they want to make sprint by sprint. They're not making a million changes, right? They're keeping it simple and only changing 1 or 2 things per sprint. And then they do it for 2 weeks. And I really like this because fear of failure can be so debilitating, both for the business owner and for your teams. And when you do things in 2-week sprints, it takes a lot of the risk out of it. It lowers the stakes. And that creates psychological safety for people to actually innovate and try things. Because if I say, hey, should we make this big change? It's like, I don't know. But it's like, hey, should we try this for 2 weeks and then talk about how it went? That feels a lot safer. And so it allows us to try new things. It allows teams to uncover obstacles, to try new things, to test new things, to be creative and innovative in a way that is less risky and also has this built-in reflection so that everyone on the team is able to then look at how did it go? How do we want to move forward? And that has been just incredible.
Yeah, I can really relate to this because I'm an implementer. I like trying new things, but it can often, well, I won't say often. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a train wreck when you implement something and then there's no place to stop and evaluate. So, you may implement something that you think is a great idea and that you kind of feel like is going well, but you have no timeline to stop and even a structure to evaluate how it's working. So you just keep going and keep going. I am so excited to be seeing how these sprints are working and also to have like the boundaries and guidelines between how many changes are we making, because they're not doing like everything different each sprint, right? You have to have controlled experiments to see what's the one thing that we can shift here. What are the two things that we can do different here to create a better result in our next sprint?
Yeah.
Keeping implementers like me in check.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because most entrepreneurs are like that, right? Like you like to try a million things all at the same time. And most entrepreneurs are pretty bad at follow up. Like they're really good at telling their team to do something. They're really bad at following up to see how it actually went. And like, you don't have to go against a grain and try and force yourself to be more disciplined when you use Scrum. It's just built in. Like you don't have to try and remember and like put it on your calendar, like follow up about this. And what does that follow up even look like? Right. It builds it in a really cool, natural way. Number 6. So speaking of entrepreneurs implementing ideas and changes, one of the things that's so great about Scrum is it's not your ideas anymore. So number 6 is eliminating top-down decision making is good for everyone. This is another one of those things that I think is really, really scary for leaders and business owners because your business has been your baby for so long and you've been leading the vision and the strategy. And your team has probably been implementers, right? They're the ones implementing your vision, which is fine to a point. That will take you to 1 million, maybe 2 million, and that's about it. At that point, you need team members who are visionaries and strategists themselves. They're not just like your minions carrying out what you want to happen. They're co-creating it with you. Not only is this absolutely necessary if you want to grow a successful organization, but it also allows your team to enjoy their job and to not just be cogs in a machine, but it allows these smart, creative people to actually be engaged at work and problem solving and innovating, which is great for burnout and attracting great talent and keeping great talent. So, like I said, this was kind of scary because teams are very autonomous. So yes, Jess and I still own the business, but we are much less involved in what teams are doing. And they have a lot more freedom to decide, we want to do this. We want to make this change. We want to try this. And they let us know what they need from us in terms of support. But that's about it. There's definitely some bigger things that we still have veto power on, like one of the things we're talking about is moving to a 4-day work week. And I fully believe we will be able to achieve that through being agile. But that's not something we're doing right now because Scrum is very new. So to make a big change in the schedules while we're in the midst of being really early in this change with Scrum and Agile, that's a lot of change. So that is something I vetoed, right? Because we've been talking about 4-day work week and they were like, great, can we implement that now? And I said, no, let's wait. So we will be doing that, but it's not a right now. But other than really big stuff like that, they really have a lot of freedom. And it's so much more relaxing. I thought it would be really scary, but it's actually really relaxing that the pressure isn't all on you to make the decisions and have the ideas. Like they're solving their own problems. They're having their own ideas. Like they are able to sprint and do it and like, just like go for it without me being a bottleneck. And that has been surprisingly freeing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's so much more freeing. At the same time, Margie and I are so much more involved with the team than we ever have been, but it's in a way that is not an energy suck. Like we're not in there like reacting and solving these big problems that were created because we were not in the like, I'll just give a quick example. Team members come to me with a question, "Hey, how do I handle this thing?" And at first I was like answering the question, and then I said, "Go to your team, see what they think." And they're like, "Oh yeah." And magically the team was able to figure it out. So it actually, what happens in this process is an unlearning, because when people are trained to come to you for every problem they have, they lose the ability to figure it out on their own. And when you use Scrum and Agile and put teams together and give them that power to figure it out on their own, you experience so much more freedom, and they feel more empowered because they're like, "Oh, I did know this. My team did know this." It's very cool.
Yes. Number 7, more role fluidity helps teams thrive and individuals stay engaged. So one thing our consultant says is that with Scrum, there is job security, but there is not role security. And this has been a mantra we have all been repeating. And this has been true for me and Jess's roles and other people's roles in the team, but also for the Scrum teams. And this has been really exciting because we have such a smart, creative team. And when really smart, creative people have the same job and send the same emails every day, it can burn them out. And because burnout's not just about number of hours worked, right? It's not about how hard something is, and it's not about how long you do it for. A lot of burnout is feeling like your work matters, feeling like you're actually engaged, feeling like your brain is actually being used. And so with Scrum and Agile, even though we do have team members who have positions, right? They have roles in the company. Those job descriptions are no longer as strict and constricting as they used to be. So yes, maybe you're an agent and you have this role description, but you can do other jobs within the team. And it allows them to first do what needs to be done, because if they need a bunch of show lists done, even if you're not a show researcher, everybody can just work on show lists. And it allows them to have diversity in their day-to-day and in their roles. And it also allows them to do what the team actually needs. So instead of being trapped in the silo of like, nope, this is my role, this is what I do, they can actually address problems in real time and do what needs to be done, which is more engaging for them. It's great for culture. And then it's also great for the business because the results are so much better.
Yeah. And it's nice too, because there's not the hierarchy of like before we had team lead and assistant lead and then, agent and show researcher. Role fluidity would have been very challenging when there's this like hierarchy, but when everyone's sort of on the same level, if someone needs to swap roles or do something different, right? Maybe an agent is going to focus on researching for shows, or maybe a researcher is like, I actually really want to do some pitching today. We don't have to have a conversation about changing jobs and like all of that goes along with changing your actual job. It's like, cool, do it. It's cool. That's my reaction to Scrum. It's awesome.
Okay. And then the last one, number 8, is happiness matters. So, and it's not as if we were these monsters before who didn't care about happiness, but I think for us and for a lot of entrepreneurs, culture and happiness did not feel like the key focus, right? The focus of the business was to be successful and make money and serve the client. And of course, we wanted a great culture. We wanted our team to be happy, but it was kind of two separate things, right? It felt like separate things of we're achieving this result for our clients. We're growing, we're doing these things. And also we want to be happy. So it was like these two separate initiatives. What we've learned now is that team happiness is such an important leading indicator for all of those hardline numbers that you want to see. And so we've been doing a lot. And part of why we implemented Scrum and Agile, partly it was for productivity, but a lot of it was to increase team happiness and improve our culture and decrease burnout, especially coming out of the pandemic. It's an intense time, right? We went from having an office to everyone working from home. It's just, I think the entire world has gone through a lot psychologically, and we wanted to have a happier team. We wanted people to be excited about coming to work. And so one of the things we started doing was a happiness survey. So happiness in the team is actually a metric that we're tracking now, and which is very exciting. So there are anonymous surveys every 2 weeks. And we're tracking happiness because we know based on the research that it is a leading indicator, so that when you see an uptick in happiness in your team, it's likely to be followed by upticks in sales and revenue, retention, productivity, all that good stuff. And I think in closing, I would just say, for so long, it felt like culture was an afterthought. And as I've grown in my leadership, as we've implemented Scrum and Agile, your goals that you want to hit, your sales goals, your revenue goals, your client goals, they are not a different goal from culture. Culture is the way that you will hit those goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool that we're at this point where it's now very clear. It's not just a dream that we have this amazing, happy, thriving culture. It's actually like a plan and action that's being realized. And it's very full circle for me, because one of my dreams when I first started hiring employees was to be a best places to work company. and and it's just been this dream for so long, but it's been really difficult to make that. I'm like, we always had like cool employees and they seemed to like us, but it never really felt quite right to like make that claim. But now I'm like, we're like getting there. And it's just interesting because there's this great resignation, but I think people are just not willing to work at a place where their soul is going to be sucked. And that's really the focus here, is on making sure people are excited and energized and working in their strength, and then able to be paid more because of that, because the business can be more profitable.
Yeah. Yeah. People aren't willing to work at terrible jobs, and nor should they. I think for a long time with small businesses, the rhetoric has been around how do you get freedom as an entrepreneur, but not around how to give that to your team. And I get that. I think a lot of that has to do with like most of us who have hired people have been burned by, employees that didn't have integrity or weren't honest. And it can be hard after you get burned to trust again, but it requires a lot of trust. Doing Scrum and Agile requires such deep trust, both like in myself, in the team. And it's hard when you've been burned and you've seen some like nightmare scenarios happen, but being able to do that, to let go, to have that trust has been incredible. And as Jess said, the vibes on our team have been amazing. And it's been really cool to hear so many different team members saying, wow, I can really feel the shift over the past 6 months, over the past year. The vibes are so great. I've never been happier to work here than I am now. And multiple people have said that to us. So we're very excited and going to stay the course.
Yeah. So one of the things, I'm going to do a quick sidebar, but it's all connected. One of the things that we love about being in a mastermind and a group coaching program is we can watch and follow along with how the coach is leading and growing their business. So if listening to this episode, you're like, I want to know more, please keep reporting back. I would invite you to reach out to me directly, Jessica at interviewconnections.com, to learn about our group coaching program. We have a group mastermind and coaching program where you get 1-hour calls with us every week, and we share with our group coaching clients everything. You will be able to hear all of our lessons learned as they are happening. So we will, of course, do podcast episodes throughout the year. But if you want time with us every week so you can learn about what we're doing and how it's working and the lessons learned, reach out to me, Jessica at interviewconnections.com, and I can share more about what that looks like. And we would love to have you in the community learning and experiencing the transformation of focusing on your business in this way.